No one in the mansion could explain why two little girls had turned a 20-room estate into a war zone. But everyone knew one thing for sure. Something had to change before Olivia Harper lost control of everything she had built. The sound of crashing glass echoed through the marble hallways as Emma and Mia Harper, the billionaire CEO's 7-year-old twin daughters, ran barefoot across the polished floor, laughing like they were chasing freedom itself. Their nanny had already quit before sunrise. The private tutor had lasted exactly 12 minutes. Even the family chauffeur refused to step into the children's wing after one of the girls had locked him in the pantry, just for fun. Olivia Harper stood at the top of the staircase in a tailored ivory suit, her jaw tight, her expression unreadable, but inside she was unraveling. She had built a company worth billions, closed deals that made grown men sweat, and survived boardroom betrayals that would have destroyed weaker people, yet nothing in her life had prepared her for these two impossible children. Emma. Mia. Enough, she said sharply, her voice cutting through the chaos. Neither girl even looked up. One of them had smeared jam across a velvet sofa, while the other was now perched on a grand piano bench, pounding random keys with both hands. Olivia's staff moved carefully around the room, like people navigating a storm they could not control. They had tried everything: rules, schedules, rewards, punishments, therapy, bribes. Nothing worked. The twins rejected authority with the fearless confidence of children who believed no adult could ever truly reach them. And the worst part was not the noise or the mess. It was the silence that followed every failed attempt to connect, that empty, aching distance that had slowly grown between Olivia and her daughters until even her presence felt like another rule they were forced to endure. She told herself it was temporary, that children went through phases, that success required sacrifice. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had won in every place that mattered to the world, and still she was losing the two people who mattered most. That afternoon, after another disastrous attempt to calm the girls, Olivia retreated to her office with a pounding headache and a phone full of missed calls. The board wanted answers. Her assistant wanted instructions. And somewhere down in the service corridor below the main floor, a man in a gray work uniform was quietly mopping up the mess the twins had left behind. His name was Daniel Carter, a janitor, a single father, and the kind of man nobody noticed until something needed fixing. He was in his late 30s, steady-eyed, soft-spoken, and carrying more life in his tired face than most people ever bothered to see. He had spent the last 3 years surviving one day at a time, raising his own son alone after losing the one person who had ever made home feel complete. He understood exhaustion. He understood grief. And as the echoes of the mansion's chaos drifted down the hallway, Daniel glanced toward the children's wing and paused, as if something in the noise had reached him on a level no one else could hear. For the first time that day, the mansion went strangely still. By the time Olivia returned to the children's wing, the chaos had only grown worse. A porcelain vase had been shattered near the staircase. One of the twins had drawn black marker lines across the wall, while the other sat cross-legged on the floor, defiantly humming as if none of it mattered. The staff had gone rigid with frustration, waiting for Olivia to explode, and she almost did. Her hands curled at her sides, her patience hanging by a thread, but before she could speak, Daniel Carter stepped quietly into the room with a mop bucket in one hand and a calm expression that seemed almost out of place in a house like this. He did not look at the girls with annoyance. He did not bark orders. He simply lowered himself to one knee and studied the broken pieces near the floor. "That vase must have been important," he said gently. Emma narrowed her eyes. Mia tilted her head. Olivia frowned, instantly suspicious. No one had ever spoken to her daughters like that. Not as if they were children with feelings, but as if their emotions might actually make sense. Daniel set the bucket aside and asked, "Which one of you is the artist?" The twins exchanged a glance. For the first time all day, they hesitated. Emma, the braver of the two, lifted the marker still clutched in her hand as if expecting to be scolded. Instead, Daniel smiled faintly and pointed to the wall. "Not bad," he said, "but I think you missed a corner." Mia let out a tiny sound that might have been a laugh. Olivia felt her pulse jump with disbelief. Around her, the house staff stared as though they were watching someone speak a foreign language to a wild animal and somehow getting a response. Daniel noticed the way the twins kept glancing at a small toy robot lying beneath the sofa, half broken and missing one wheel. Without being asked, he reached under the furniture, retrieved it, and examined it for a moment before saying, "Looks like this guy has had a rough day too." Mia's expression changed instantly. She crawled forward and snatched the toy from his hand. "Can you fix it?" she demanded, suspicious but hopeful. Daniel turned it over once, then nodded. "Maybe, but I'll need help." That answer, simple and unforced, seemed to loosen something inside the room. The girls looked at him differently now, not as a servant, not as an adult trying to control them, but as someone who might actually stay long enough to understand them. Olivia watched all of this in stunned silence. She had hired experts, paid specialists, and consulted child psychologists who could quote theories for hours, yet none of them had made her daughters look at a grown man with this kind of guarded curiosity. Daniel, meanwhile, had not raised his voice once. He did not rush the girls. He did not force compliance. Instead, he asked questions, gave them choices, and treated even their defiance like something worth understanding. It was infuriating. It was suspicious. And, against every instinct Olivia had, it was working. When Mia finally handed him the robot, Daniel smiled and told her he would fix it after finishing his shift. Emma immediately asked if he knew how to repair things other than toys. Daniel glanced up at the ceiling, pretending to think. "Depends," he said. "Are we talking about machines or broken hearts?" The room went silent. Olivia's eyes narrowed, but the twins were already leaning in closer, as if they had just discovered a secret doorway in a house they thought they knew completely. For the first time since the morning began, they were not fighting. They were listening. Olivia was not the kind of woman who let confusion linger. By the next morning, she had already decided that whatever had happened in the children's wing the day before was nothing more than a strange coincidence. Daniel Carter was a janitor. A temporary fix. A fluke. That was the explanation she repeated to herself as she sat in her glass-walled office, reviewing contracts while her phone buzzed non-stop with calls from board members asking when she would finally resolve the situation at home. But outside her office, the situation was becoming impossible to ignore. The twins had refused breakfast unless Daniel was the one who brought it. They had ignored their private tutor again. And when a security guard tried to usher them to the playroom, both girls burst into tears so suddenly that the man backed away in alarm. Olivia received the report with a clenched jaw. She told herself she was offended by the children's behavior, not by Daniel's strange influence over them. Yet a part of her was unsettled in a way she did not want to name. She had spent years believing control was the same thing as competence, that order could be imposed on anything if enough money and pressure were applied. But her daughters were proving otherwise, and Daniel's quiet success only made the failure more humiliating. That afternoon, she found him in the service corridor repairing a broken lamp the girls had accidentally knocked to the floor. "I didn't authorize you to be in their room," Olivia said coldly as she stepped into the narrow hallway. Daniel looked up, calm and unbothered. "It was broken," he replied, and the girls were upset. "That is not your concern." He tightened the last screw, set the lamp upright, and met her gaze without challenge. "With respect, ma'am, when a child is upset, it becomes everyone's concern." Olivia hated how composed he was. Men in boardrooms always tried to impress her. Lawyers tried to intimidate her. Investors tried to flatter her. Daniel did none of those things, which somehow made him harder to dismiss. She crossed her arms. "You're a janitor. You clean floors. You do not manage my daughters." "No," he said quietly. "But I do know what it looks like when a child isn't acting out just to be difficult." The words landed harder than she expected. Olivia's expression sharpened. "And what exactly is that supposed to mean?" Daniel hesitated for the first time, glancing toward the children's wing before answering. "It means sometimes kids aren't trying to be seen as a problem. They're trying to prove no one can handle them because they already expect to be left." The hallway seemed to shrink around them. Olivia stared at him, irritated by how quickly the conversation had turned personal. She should have dismissed him immediately. She should have reminded him of his place. Instead, she felt something unfamiliar and uncomfortable moving beneath her anger. The thought that her daughters might not simply be rebellious, but frightened. The thought that they might be testing every adult in the house, waiting to see who would leave first. Across the hall, the twins appeared at the doorway, watching silently. Mia held the repaired toy robot Daniel had fixed with a small piece of tape and a missing screw. Emma folded her arms, trying to look unimpressed, but neither girl stepped away. Daniel noticed them and crouched slightly, speaking without an ounce of performance. "I finished your robot," he said. "Not perfect, but it should last a while." Mia hugged the toy to her chest. Emma looked at Olivia, then back at Daniel, and asked in a voice barely above a whisper, "Are you coming back later?" Olivia felt her stomach drop. It was such a small question, but it carried a weight she did not know how to bear. Daniel smiled gently. "If you want me to." And just like that, the balance inside the mansion shifted again. By the end of the week, the mansion felt less like a home and more like a battlefield with polished floors. Olivia tried everything to reassert control. She brought in a child behavior consultant from Manhattan, a woman in elegant glasses who spoke in calm, clinical phrases about boundaries and reinforcement. The twins listened for exactly 3 minutes before Emma climbed under the table, and Mia began loudly repeating every word in a mocking voice. The consultant left 20 minutes later with her clipboard tucked tightly under her arm and a look on her face that clearly said she would never return. A second specialist followed, then a third. Each one failed in a different way, but the result was always the same. The girls resisted, Olivia grew more frustrated, and the staff moved through the house with the exhausted caution of people waiting for the next explosion. Daniel, meanwhile, remained exactly what he had always been, unassuming, patient, and impossible to ignore once the twins decided they liked him. He fixed what was broken. He listened when they talked. He never tried to force affection, which somehow made them give him more of it. The most maddening part for Olivia was that Daniel seemed to understand her daughters without asking the endless questions every expert insisted on. He noticed small things. Emma always sat nearest the door when she felt anxious. Mia pretended not to care when she was hurt, then clung to the first person who noticed. Daniel remembered these details. He acted on them, and the girls responded. One rainy afternoon, Olivia watched from the staircase as Daniel sat on the floor of the children's playroom building a tower from old cardboard boxes. The twins were helping him, arguing over which box should go on top. There was laughter in the room. Real laughter, not the brittle kind Olivia had heard during parties or photo shoots. It struck her so sharply that she had to grip the banister. This was what she had wanted all along. Not perfection, not obedience, just this easy, living warmth she had never been able to create. But instead of feeling relieved, she felt replaced. The emotion embarrassed her, so she turned away before anyone could see it. Later that evening, she called Daniel to the kitchen under the pretense of discussing house schedules. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of the twins in the playroom. Olivia stood at the counter, her posture rigid, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're encouraging them," she said. Daniel did not deny it. "I'm engaging them. You're crossing lines. I'm helping 2 little girls who are desperate for attention." Olivia's eyes flashed. They already have everything they need. For the first time, Daniel's expression hardened, not with anger, but with a calm sadness that made her feel exposed. "No, they don't," he said softly. "They have rooms, toys, tutors, and nannies who keep leaving. What they need is someone who stays." The words hit with more force than she wanted to admit. Olivia's mouth tightened, but Daniel kept going, steady and respectful. "They don't trust adults because adults keep treating them like problems to be solved. They're not broken, Mrs. Harper. They're scared." Olivia looked away, her throat suddenly tight. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that fear was not an excuse for disobedience, that she had given her daughters everything money could buy. But deep down, she knew that wasn't enough. The silence stretched between them until the sound of tiny footsteps approached the kitchen doorway. Emma stood there first, clutching her repaired robot. Mia appeared behind her, rubbing one eye sleepily. They had been listening. Olivia felt the truth of that in a single, humiliating wave. The girls did not come to her. They came to Daniel. And for the first time, she understood that losing control was not the same as losing the fight. It was only the beginning. The change did not happen all at once. It arrived in fragments so small that Olivia almost missed them. A shared breakfast where the twins actually sat at the table instead of hiding beneath it. A bedtime argument that ended with Daniel kneeling beside the bed, helping Mia search under the blanket for a missing ribbon. A moment in the garden when Emma, usually guarded and sharp, asked him why he never seemed angry. Daniel, holding a rake in one hand and looking toward the gray sky, simply said, "Because being angry all the time doesn't leave much room for people." The girls grew quieter around him in the days that followed, but not in the fearful way they had been around everyone else. It was the silence of trust, tentative and fragile, like a door opening only a few inches at a time. Olivia watched this transformation with a mixture of disbelief and resentment. She told herself she was pleased. Any mother would be. But each step the twins took toward Daniel seemed to remind her of every moment she had failed to reach them herself. She worked late, came home later, and spent more time reading reports than listening to her daughters. She had spent years believing that providing was the same as loving. Daniel was proving otherwise without ever saying it directly. One evening, as thunder rolled across the city and rain struck the mansion windows in hard, restless lines, Mia came running into the hallway in tears. Her favorite stuffed rabbit had fallen into the pool outside during a sudden gust of wind, and she was too frightened to go after it. Emma stood frozen nearby, trying to be brave, but clearly panicking too. Olivia, already exhausted from a brutal call with investors, started to step forward, but Daniel was faster. He pulled on his coat, grabbed a flashlight, and headed outside without hesitation. The storm had turned the garden into a blur of wind and water. Olivia followed to the terrace, where she found Daniel crouched near the edge of the pool, one hand braced against the slick stone while the other reached carefully into the dark water. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the scene in a silver burst. Mia stood in the doorway sobbing, while Emma gripped Olivia's sleeve so tightly that it hurt. Daniel finally rose, soaked through, holding the rabbit in his hand like it was something precious. He did not make a speech. He did not ask for thanks. He simply walked back inside, dropped to one knee, and handed the toy back to Mia. The little girl threw her arms around him with such force that he nearly lost his balance. For one brief second, the entire house seemed to stop breathing. Olivia watched from the terrace, rain dripping from the edge of her coat, and something inside her shifted in a way she could not control. It was not admiration exactly, not yet. It was the painful realization that Daniel had just done what she, with all her money and authority, had never managed to do. He had made her daughters feel safe enough to let go. That night, after the girls fell asleep, Olivia stood alone in the darkened hallway and looked at the closed door of the playroom. Beyond it, Daniel was finishing his shift, quietly putting things back in order. She should have been angry. She should have told him to stay in his lane. Instead, she found herself leaning against the wall, exhausted, and asking the one question she had avoided for days. Why did it take a janitor to do what no one else could? Olivia did not sleep much that night. The image of Mia clinging to Daniel in the rain kept replaying in her mind with an almost cruel persistence. By morning, she had convinced herself that her reaction was unreasonable, that exhaustion and stress had made everything feel more significant than it really was. So when she entered the breakfast room and found both twins already seated at the table waiting for Daniel to bring their food, her patience snapped. "What is this?" she asked, her tone controlled but sharp enough to make the maids glance at one another nervously. Emma looked up first, her expression wary. Mia said nothing. Daniel, setting down a tray of toast and fruit, paused at the edge of the room. "Breakfast," he said simply. Olivia stared at the girls, then at him. "I did not ask for your help with the children this morning." Daniel kept his voice calm. "They asked for me. That is not the point." "Isn't it?" he replied, not challenging her, just asking in a way that made her feel even more exposed. She hated that. "You are a staff member," Olivia said, each word measured with ice. "You do not make decisions for this family." Daniel looked toward the twins, who had gone very still. "I'm not making decisions for them," he said. "I'm listening to them." The room became tense enough to crack. Olivia turned to the girls. "Emma, Mia, if you want breakfast, you will eat it now and stop behaving like this." Mia's lower lip trembled. Emma crossed her arms, but neither moved. Daniel noticed instantly. He crouched beside the table and quietly asked, "Would you like the toast? Cut into stars again, or do you want it just like yesterday?" Mia blinked in surprise. Emma glanced at her sister. "Stars," Mia whispered. Daniel nodded and began cutting the toast with the kind of care that made the act itself feel like a promise. Olivia watched, stunned by the simplicity of it. No bribes, no lectures, no power struggle, just attention. And attention, she realized with a sudden pang, was something her daughters were starving for. The realization made her angry because it was true. Later that day, a bigger test came. One of Olivia's business partners was due to visit the mansion with his wife and teenage son. The house needed to look perfect. Olivia needed the children to behave. She gave strict instructions, then retreated upstairs to prepare for the meeting, only to hear chaos erupt below a few minutes later. Emma had hidden behind a curtain and refused to come out. Mia had spilled juice on the white tablecloth and was on the verge of tears because she thought she would be sent away. Olivia rushed into the dining room, already furious, only to find Daniel speaking gently with the girls near the window. He was kneeling on the floor, holding Mia's hands while Emma peeked out from behind the curtain, watching every movement. "You are not in trouble," he was saying. "But you have to tell me what's wrong." Mia sniffed. "We don't want strangers." "Then tell them that," Daniel said. "You're allowed to have a voice." Olivia stopped in the doorway. The sentence struck her harder than she expected. "You're allowed to have a voice." The girls stared at him, uncertain, then looked toward Olivia with the kind of fear that only comes when a child expects disappointment. Daniel slowly rose and stepped back, giving them space. "Go ahead," he murmured. "Tell her." And for the first time, the twins did not hide. They spoke. Not loudly, not confidently, but truthfully. Olivia listened, stunned, as her daughters explained their fear of being judged, their dislike of being paraded around, their exhaustion from always being told how to act. Daniel had not forced the truth out of them. He had created a place safe enough for it to surface. Olivia felt something. Inside her crack open, and this time she could not pretend it was nothing. The tension in the mansion became impossible to hide after that afternoon. Olivia had heard her daughters speak honestly for the first time in months, and although she refused to show it, the memory unsettled her more than any business crisis ever had. She spent the rest of the day moving through meetings and phone calls with a stiffness that made everyone around her keep their distance. Daniel, meanwhile, remained in the background, as steady and quiet as ever, but now Olivia could no longer ignore the fact that the twins watched him with a trust they had never given anyone else. That realization followed her like a shadow. The evening began with another small disaster. Mia grew upset when her ribbon went missing, and Emma, already on edge, snapped at a maid who had tried to help. Before the situation could spiral, Daniel stepped in with calm precision, kneeling beside the girls and asking them to breathe with him. He spoke in the same gentle tone he always used, but there was something different in his face that night, a heaviness Olivia had not noticed before. After the twins settled down, Olivia found him in the hallway outside the playroom, straightening a stack of books that had been left on the floor. "You seem to know exactly what to say to them," she said, her voice low and guarded. Daniel did not look up right away. "I usually know what not to say," he answered. "That helps more than people think." Olivia crossed her arms. "You make it sound simple." He finally met her eyes. "It isn't simple. It's just honest." The answer irritated her because it sounded like something she should have understood already. She had spent years negotiating mergers, threats, and public scandals, yet the truth about her own children remained just beyond her grasp. Daniel's presence forced her to see how far she had drifted from them. Not from lack of love, but from distance, from speed, from a life built on constant pressure and the belief that sacrifice alone was enough. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, Olivia heard raised voices near the playroom. She hurried down the hall and found Mia standing frozen in the doorway, tears on her cheeks, while Emma had knocked over a chair in frustration. Daniel was crouched between them, one hand lifted slightly, not to command but to calm. Olivia stepped forward, ready to demand an explanation, but the look on Mia's face stopped her cold. The child was terrified, not of punishment, of being misunderstood. Daniel noticed Olivia in the doorway and spoke softly without turning. "She had a nightmare," he said. Emma woke up first and thought it was something else. Olivia's throat tightened. She had not even known. Daniel continued speaking, his attention fixed on the girls. "You don't need to fight each other when you're scared," he told them. "You only need someone who stays." The words landed with a force that made Olivia feel both exposed and ashamed. She remembered every nanny who had quit, every professional who had failed, Every time she had told herself that the girls would be fine as long as they were provided for. But standing there, watching Daniel hold the emotional center of the room together with nothing but patience and presence, she finally understood how wrong she had been. He was not controlling the girls. He was reaching them. And he was doing it with a kind of quiet courage she had never had to learn. Later, when the twins were asleep, Olivia remained in the hallway, staring at the closed door of the playroom while Daniel finished tidying up inside. The house was silent except for the soft sound of his footsteps. The question rose in her again, deeper now, impossible to dismiss. How had a janitor become the only person in her home who could keep her family from falling apart? By the next morning, Olivia was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. It was the kind of exhaustion that settled into the bones after a person had spent too long pretending not to feel what was right in front of them. She stood by the window in her office, coffee untouched in her hand, watching the courtyard below where Daniel was helping the twins water the garden. Emma was carefully tipping a small metal can toward the rose bushes, while Mia hovered beside him, asking a stream of questions about why some flowers bent with the wind and others did not. Daniel answered each one patiently, his voice low enough that the girls had to lean in to hear him. Olivia should have turned away. Instead, she kept watching. There was something painfully natural about the scene, something so ordinary and warm that it made the rest of her life feel cold by comparison. When Daniel noticed a muddy patch near the walkway, he gently redirected the girls and showed them how to avoid stepping into it. Emma laughed. Mia followed his instructions without protest. Olivia felt the reaction before she could stop it. A sharp, uneasy sting of jealousy. Not jealousy of romance, but of connection, of the easy trust her daughters gave him, the kind of trust she had spent years trying and failing to earn. She hated herself for feeling it, which only made the emotion stronger. Later that afternoon, she found Daniel alone in the utility room, organizing supplies with his usual quiet efficiency. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and said the words she had been avoiding. "They listen to you more than they listen to me." Daniel looked up, then returned the can of cleaning polish to the shelf before answering. "Children listen to who makes them feel safe." Olivia's jaw tightened. "And you think I don't make them feel safe?" He paused, careful now. "I think you make them secure in a material sense. That's different." The distinction struck her like a slap. Daniel was not being cruel. That was worse. He was being honest. "You have built an empire," he continued quietly. "But those girls don't need an empire. They need a mother who can slow down long enough to see them." Olivia stared at him, anger and shame rising together in her chest. Every instinct told her to dismiss him, to remind him that he was a janitor speaking far above his place. But the words would not come, because the truth was standing between them in the form of a silence she could no longer outrun. "You don't understand what my life is like," she said at last, though even she heard how weak it sounded. Daniel did not flinch. "Maybe not all of it," he replied. "But I understand what it looks like when someone spends so long surviving that they forget how to be present." The sentence stayed with her. It followed her through dinner, through conference calls, through the long hour before bedtime when she sat outside the twins' room and heard them laughing softly at something Daniel had said. She thought about all the people in her life who respected her power, feared her temper, or admired her success, and realized that none of them had ever told her the truth the way he had. It was unbearable and necessary. A few hours later, she found the courage to enter the playroom after the girls had fallen asleep. Daniel was on the floor, sorting the toys into small baskets. Olivia stopped a few feet away and, for once, did not speak as the CEO, as the authority, or as the woman in control. "I think I've been doing this all wrong," she said quietly. Daniel looked up, and in his expression she saw not triumph, but understanding. "You're not too late," he told her. And for the first time in a very long time, Olivia believed him. The storm that had been building inside Olivia for weeks finally broke on a quiet Sunday morning. The mansion was still, the air soft with early light, and for once no one was rushing, shouting, or trying to fix a crisis before breakfast. Olivia stood in the doorway of the children's playroom and watched Daniel sit on the floor with Emma and Mia, all three of them building a crooked tower out of wooden blocks. It leaned dangerously to one side, and the twins were giggling every time it threatened to collapse. Daniel did not try to make it perfect. He only laughed with them and let them decide when to add the next piece. Olivia felt a strange pressure in her chest, something close to grief and relief at the same time. For so long, she had believed that being a mother meant providing safety, structure, and opportunity. She had given them all of that, and still her daughters had been starving for something she had ignored: presence. When the tower finally fell, Mia shrieked with delight. Emma clapped her hands. Daniel looked up and caught Olivia watching. He smiled, not with pride, but with quiet invitation, as if he were asking her to step into the life she had been observing from the outside. That afternoon, Olivia asked him to stay after his shift, not as a janitor, not as a problem to be managed, as a person she wanted to understand. They met in the garden while the twins played near the fountain, their laughter floating through the warm air. Olivia kept her hands folded tightly in front of her, uncertain how to begin. "I owe you an apology," she said at last. Daniel lowered the watering can in his hand and waited without interrupting. "I assumed your place in this house told me everything I needed to know about you," she continued. "I was wrong." He gave a small nod, but said nothing. The silence forced her to keep going. "You saw my daughters more clearly than I did. You were patient when I was sharp, calm when I was angry, and consistent when everyone else ran away." Her voice faltered, and for the first time she did not try to hide it. "I thought money meant I could protect them. I thought control was the same as love." Daniel's expression softened, but he remained steady. "A lot of people think that," he said. "It doesn't make them bad. It just means they're tired." Olivia almost laughed at how accurately he had named her life. Tired. That was the word beneath everything. The loneliness, the pressure, the endless proving, the fear of failing in public and in private. She looked toward the children and saw Emma leaning into Daniel's side while Mia showed him a drawing with fierce concentration. They had not accepted him because he was useful. They had trusted him because he stayed. That was the lesson, and it hurt because it was simple. In the weeks that followed, the house changed. Olivia began spending real time with her daughters, not just overseeing them. She sat on the floor. She listened. She asked questions and let the answers take as long as they needed. The twins still adored Daniel, and he remained part of their lives. But now he was no longer the only bridge between Olivia and her children. Slowly, awkwardly, she became one herself. One evening, long after the sun had gone down, Emma fell asleep against Olivia's shoulder in the family room while Mia curled beside Daniel on the rug, clutching her. Repaired robot. Olivia looked around the room at the small, imperfect, deeply human scene and understood at last what she had gained. Not a perfect household, not total control, something better. A family that knew how to breathe again. And in that quiet, ordinary miracle, Olivia Harper finally learned that the impossible thing Daniel had done was never just fixing two difficult little girls. He had shown an entire broken family how to come home.